today I want to talk to you about something a bit more pragmatic. We hear about security tokens, commodity tokens, but I want to take a step back and let's talk about cash. So today, 83.7% of global retail transactions are undertaken using cash. That's insane, because if you think about it, that number 200 years ago was 100%. So that means our entire financial infrastructure build-out has only taken away 16.3%. So that number is staggering. There's 360 billion banknotes in circulation, with tens of billions minted and destroyed each year. Again, an insane number. And finally, 32% of all transactions worldwide are undertaken using cash. A third of all transactions worldwide across industries, across geographies, are done using cash. So why is cash so popular? Well, for starters, it's convenient and it's fast, right? I just put it in my pocket, I give it to someone else, and that's the transaction done. So cash is super easy and super quick. It's very accessible, right? We keep talking about the inclusion of crypto, but you have about 4 billion people with no access to internet, so how inclusive can it really be? And then privacy, right? It's a peer-to-peer payment, so it's as private as it gets. So that's what cash is good at, but what is cash bad at? Well, reach and volume, right? It's still a physical item. I still have to give it to someone. So it doesn't really work for international or high volume payments. It's not that inclusive, really, because when people transact using cash, they don't come online. They don't get integrated into our economic and financial networks. So by just using cash, they don't have access to loans, access to credit, and a whole wide range of benefits from going through a financial network. And it's not that transparent. It's private, but it's not that transparent. So for security and auditability, cash doesn't work that well. So what's cash good at and what's cash bad at? We can clearly see the same things it's good at cannibalizes the things it's bad at, right? So it's convenient and fast, but it has limited reach. It's highly accessible, but it's not very inclusive. It's private, but it's not transparent. So just by looking at these things, we can see who likes cash and who doesn't like cash. So for starters, who likes cash? 2 billion unbanked people. They have limited access to financial infrastructure. Cash is all they have. But what's really interesting is 700 million banked people rely on cash in their day-to-day. So this myth that cash is a developing or an emerging market tool is false. For example, Japan has an 18.1% cash to GDP ratio, one of the highest in the world, primarily driven by low interest rates and in some cases negative interest rates. So who doesn't like cash? Governments lose $700 billion a year to tax fraud avoidance, so it's clearly not their favorite thing. And big business loses another $220 billion a year. And if you just consider these things, it becomes really clear where the line is drawn. It's not drawn across emerging and developing markets versus developed markets. It's drawn across individuals and institutions. Individuals like cash, and institutions hate it. So what does this have to do with blockchain technology? Well, put simply, if we look at the things blockchain-based currencies are good at, we see that it ticks all the boxes. So it's convenient, accessible, private, has reach, it's inclusive, and it's transparent. But what is it bad at? It's not stable at all. And it's difficult for countries to set policies if they can't control imports and exports, if they can't define macroprudential policy to manage systemic risk. And it's very difficult to monitor and control. And depending on which side of the fence you're on, that could be an advantage or a disadvantage. So how do we capitalize on all the benefits, but without the downsides that I just mentioned? Well, on one side we have the paper-based cash, and on the other side we have the cryptocurrencies. And whatever we come up with has to be easy, convenient, and fast. It has to be accessible and inclusive. You should be able to transact any amount you want, and it should be regulated, stable, reliable, fair, and most importantly, secure. So what does that look like? We think it looks like Jcash. So Jcash is the Jibrel.Network's crypto fiat solution. We believe in a crypto fiat future. Just like you can go to an ATM and withdraw 20 bucks, put them in your pocket, and now you can transact off-grid, you could do the same with crypto fiat. You go to your online banking, withdraw some dollars into your wallet, and then you can transact largely off-grid. But again, anyone can tokenize everything, right? That's pretty easy if you've learned anything from the last 2 years. You can tokenize whatever you want. But that's not when the job stops, right? It's a much harder ask to get this up and running. So for starters, you need a dumb phone module. You need a way for these 4 billion people with no internet to transact. You need to be able to do micropayment calculations for microinsurance. So at the Jibrel.Network, these are things we think about all the time, right? So for example, a security and recovery module. If I transfer $1,000 to the wrong bank account, even if it's a valid bank account, there's protocol in place to help me recover those funds. And after maybe 90 minutes, 90 very frustrating minutes on the phone with Bank of America, I recover my funds. Yet when I'm moving my Golem network token from wallet A to wallet B, I'm basically, not in the best state of mind, because if something goes wrong, I'm on my own. I'm screwed. So these are the considerations we should all be thinking about. We shouldn't be really bullish and on the whole tokenize everything. Let's get the infrastructure in place so that we can start competing against cash, so we can start competing against these other alternatives. So what next? Well, clearly it's our responsibility to empower these individuals, these governments, these businesses and regulators, and help them build the financial networks of the future. Because as it stands, we're struggling. And what are we doing about it? Well, for starters, we're trying to pilot this with as many governments as possible, and we recently announced our partnership with a member of the Maktoum family to pilot this in the UAE. We're hoping to try and implement a solution for Jcash for blue-collar workers who don't have access to bank accounts, don't have access to cheap remittance solutions. So as much as you're going to hear a bunch of sexy ideas and a bunch of cool ideas in this conference over the next few days, it does well to remember the majority of the problems that we suffer from today, they're not very sexy. 4 billion people don't have access to the internet. So Jcash is available to licensed entities, regulators, and governments to pilot today. If you're a talented developer, we'd love to speak to you to see how we can collaborate using Jcash. And we're based out of Switzerland, and our operations are in New York. So we'll be around, and we have a booth. And if you're one of those entities I just mentioned, we'd love to speak to you. Thank you so much.